Florida's bad news bears dire revenue projections of billions in budget shortfalls. Is there a maze ahead for legislators, and are sales tax exemptions the way out of that maze? And Governor Charlie Crist changes the face of an entire branch of government. All of that this week on Power Play with our guests, Mary Ann Lindley, editorial page editor of the Tallahassee Democrat, and Dave Royce, editor of the News Service of Florida. The free fall continues. We've never seen a budget situation like this in probably decades, if ever, in Florida. Where's it all going to end?
Well, I don't know if it's going to end at all. I think it's going to go on in free fall for quite some time, but behind the scenes here, I'm hearing a lot of people say, well, I'm a Republican, but we got to do something. And we are right here in the Capitol. We're seeing people just from all over the state. This next week, I think the PTAs of Florida are coming up to say we can't go on like this. So I don't know if we're going to end up like California and have all-nighters in the legislature to try to break some kind of impasse, but I think we're getting there.
Well, no matter how many rallies in tally there are, is there going to have to be blood in the streets before lawmakers say we really do have to do something about this?
I'm not sure it's going to come to that. I think that there are Republicans talking about changing the tax structure like they've never talked about before. There are Republicans talking about the possibility of tax increases. Not a lot of Republicans, and there's still a lot of holdouts. I don't know that we'll have to get the blood in the streets, but who knows? We might not be far from that.
But this is not idealism. This is reality, pragmatism,
right,
to actually talk about tax reform. So the biggest kind of tax reform in a state that's funded and founded on the sales tax would seem to be looking at these exemptions.
Right. Well, of which we have how many? More than 200, and I think one committee's looking at 51 or so of them. But, I mean, every one of them is going to be a battle royal. We're already seeing that. And
every one of them has a constituency, and every one of them is going to fight like heck to keep them in there. But and they're not that much money cumulatively anyway, so even if you eliminate all the exemptions, it doesn't solve your problem.
But aren't they about as much, if you eliminated the exemptions, as what we generate from what we do tax with the sales tax now?
Yeah,
you need to eliminate the exemptions, and you need to add the services tax, which we tried to do. It's been 20 years now.
But it's a whole different world right now, right? So what is the shot in this
service-based
session?
economy, and it is, as John McKay tried to point out a few years ago, and he looks like a prophet now. At some point, sales tax is going to fall through the floor, and we're going to need to tax something else.
If you start with the baseline of food and medicine, the necessities of life are not going to be taxed. How do you justify not having it on something like electrolysis and bikini wax?
Right, yeah. Is a bikini
point.
wax necessary? That's what we were thinking. I don't know. Maybe for some.
All right, switching gears here to Governor Charlie Crist, now changing the face of the Florida Supreme Court with his fourth appointment in little more than 2 years. Stunning.
Yeah, he's now appointed the majority of the court. He's had 4 picks out of the 7, actually in about a year. And
can't remember another governor that had that big an impact.
Nor when will someone ever get the chance again. He's had the chance to completely remake the court. And the interesting thing is he has not made it in his party's image. And there are some conservatives who are not real happy with. He's got a liberal, a moderate, and 2 conservatives.
But now you have to ask, who wants to be on the Supreme Court or a judge at all, except for the prestige of the thing, because they're being starved. They have no money coming into the courts, or so they say.
I think it's still a pretty good gig. And if the governor's getting criticized by conservatives in his own party, there's a benefit to these appointments for him as well, isn't there? Politically?
Well, it could be. I mean, we hope not. I mean, we hope that it's above that, right?
Well, we hope so, but there is some impact from everything you do in government. And frankly, whether he's running for governor next year for re-election or the U.S. Senate, he is now the darling of other segments of the Florida
population. And he does have more of an understanding of the judiciary, I think, and he's got more respect for it because he's an attorney. I don't know that he's ever practiced, but he's an attorney. He was Attorney General. And the courts have not been held in high regard for quite some time by the legislature or the former governor.
We're going to go to your respective power plays of the week. Mary Ann.
All right, my nomination is Senator J.D. Alexander, and I think he's going to get the No Good Deed Goes Unpunished award. He has proposed spending $500,000 to set up a website so 18 million Floridians can weigh in on every expense, every check the state writes, so they can look at your paychecks, your travel expenses, your lunch expenses. And just as an editorial page editor, I know everybody with a debit card is suddenly an economist. I think he'll rue the day that he asks for people to tell them where the waste in government
A
is.
$500,000 PR gesture, perhaps. Dave?
I think it's Governor Christ for appointing James Perry, the last of his 4 picks so far, to the Supreme Court, ignoring an intense letter-writing campaign from some of the more conservative elements in his party, and reaching out to moderates with yet another Supreme Court pick, making a court that looks more like Florida than his party might want it to look like.
Okay. Mary Ann Lindley, Dave Royce, thank you very much. For the latest political news, go to the Safety Review, and we'll see you next time on Power Play.